Okay, that moves us on to public communications. This is time and place for the general public to address the Fire Protection District, Public Financing Authority Board, and City Council on any item listed or not listed on the agenda. Comments are to be limited to 5 minutes per individual or less as deemed necessary by the chair, depending on the number of individuals desiring to speak. Public communications period will not exceed 1 hour prior to the commencement of the business portion of the agenda. We have a number of speakers here this evening, so we will limit the presentations of public comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I need to respond to some comments that were made at the last meeting by two sisters. First, I'd like to say that we cannot, our group, that group, cannot control what anyone says on their personal Facebook page. We never called anyone filthy bikers, so please, we never said that. The other thing was that we stand outside after meetings trying to intimidate people. That is also not true. One of the sisters, Terry Jacobs, who is a current volunteer and at one time was a volunteer liaison, alluded to the fact that we have been hated at the shelter for the past 5 years. I want to read an email between Terry and I back in August of 2011 to show that this is not true. Terry was going to have a meeting with staff to try to say, let's put differences behind and everyone work together. So I'm writing this to Terry. We have been trying for years to get staff to not hate volunteers and scare them away, so hopefully things will change. Also, I have always found it very interesting that even if they do not like someone personally, they would rather get rid of that person instead of being appreciative of the fact that the person is taking out dozens of dogs during the week. Who will take those dogs out then? And Terry's response to me, I agree with you 100%. As I've said, without you and other dog walkers, the quality of life for the dogs wouldn't be anywhere near as good as it is, probably shortening many more lives. Volunteers have always had a tough time feeling welcome and appreciated, and it seems that all it takes is for one person to have a problem with staff and we're all condemned. Mr. Mayor, we loved working with the animals, particularly the dogs. We were proud of our city. It breaks our heart that we can no longer volunteer. I know everyone just feels like a line has been drawn, but we're still saying, come on, we're adults. We can get beyond this. Let us go in and help the animals, particularly the large dogs. I mean, records have shown that 2012 was the highest killing ever at the shelter. We don't say anything that's not true. That's why we pay money for the records request. We're not going by hearsay. We're going by experience. We have people coming in saying they know because they adopted a dog 4 years ago. They know because they're fundraising. You know, they know because they raised money for Casa Colina. Those are all wonderful, wonderful things, but they weren't the ones working in the shelter with the animals, particularly our group. I mean, we were in there almost daily, every other day, some of us. And we know how these dogs were suffering. Thank you.
Dana Keithley, followed by Andra Gilbertson.
Good evening, City Council, members of the public. I wanted to point out that the Animal Center recently had their No Dog Left Behind event on Saturday, August 3rd. It was great to see that event come back. It had been gone for the past 6 months. Before, it had actually been held every month. It was the second Saturday of every month. Again, we're not sure why that event had taken such a long hiatus, but we're glad to see it back. But what was interesting at the event was that there were several volunteers, and if you could please show this on the screen, there were some volunteers there who were not wearing the proper uniform. And again, these were not members of the public. These were people who were going in and out of the shelter to walk the dogs. We had an individual here, and then we also had another individual who looked very young. And what was interesting, though, again, is that he is not wearing a volunteer T-shirt, nor is he wearing a volunteer apron. And I know that this sounds like I'm nitpicking or trying to go after individuals, but I'm just asking a serious question about the policy. Because what was interesting is that one of my reasons for being dismissed as a volunteer. You can see I was written up in violation of animal center policies for not having on the proper attire. It says on here on November 6, 2012, that I was in violation. What I was actually wearing was this t-shirt right here that I received when I was working as the Best Friends Shelter Coordinator for when we had the grant. And I did have this on underneath my volunteer apron so I could easily be identified as a volunteer. What was interesting is that when this was actually given to me and I was said to be in violation of the dress code, this is actually from the 2012 volunteer manual. And this was actually hanging on the walkboard on the day that I was actually written up for this. And on here you can see it says, do wear your name tag and RC Pets volunteer t-shirt or apron at all times so that you're easily identified as a volunteer. It also goes on to say each volunteer while performing their duties will wear an RC Pets volunteer t-shirt and or an apron. I know that the policy has since been changed to say an apron underneath a plain t-shirt or just a volunteer t-shirt. So why were these two volunteers allowed to be able to break this policy? And the volunteer coordinator and the director were there on staff that day. And if the one volunteer, the extremely young looking man, is actually under 18 years of age, again on here it says that you must be 18 years or older. And again, we're curious as to why these individuals were able to volunteer not in the proper attire. And it was also brought to our attention that they were able to sign a same-day volunteer waiver, not having to go through a live scan background check, not having to go through an orientation. So I'm not trying to be smart. I'm not trying to ask a rhetorical question. I'm just curious as to what this waiver actually is. Thank you.
Andra Gilbertson, followed by Allison Kreider.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is Andra Gilbertson, and I am a volunteer at the Rancho Cucamonga Animal Care and Adoption Center. I would like to reintroduce you to two of the gals that are there. These girls have been at the shelter for a year, and their time is up. I have worked a lot. I have spent a lot of time with these beautiful girls, and they are wonderful companion pets. I am appealing to the public if they know of a situation or they can help get these two wonderful dogs out of the shelter before they are euthanized. That would be wonderful. They can talk to anyone in a purple shirt or see me afterwards. Because we do have a director who does not rescue. She does euthanize, and she doesn't rescue, and the staff doesn't rescue. So if someone doesn't come in and adopt a dog or a cat, you know, they don't have a chance. The only people who could save these animals and who work at rescue are these 4 volunteers who were fired. It's been almost a year. They have not been replaced, nor will they. They are the best at what they do. And the director who rejects these talents do not have animals' welfare at heart, but it's a regressive agenda which the animals come out the loser. I'm also upset with the council. The city manager, you have all kicked them to the curb after many, many years of devotion and dedication to these animals. I am respectfully requesting that the city council set up a meeting with them and with the director and whomever else you feel can get to the bottom of this solution. This problem, we are not going away. And this is growing. So many animals are dying needlessly. It is heartbreaking. And I think that is the least you can do for these dedicated workers who have worked so hard for this city. You know, all we want to do is save animals. Why is this so difficult? Thank you.
Thank you. Allison Kreider, followed by Jesse Kreider.
monitor on, please. Thank you. Hello, Mayor, Council, and tax-paying citizens of Rancho Cucamonga. My name is Allison Kreider. I am a current volunteer at the animal shelter and have been since 2007. I'm here to talk about the inflated numbers the Field Services Office reported in 2012 to justify the addition of 2 full-time animal service positions in place of 2 part-time positions, which in turn cost the city more money. The shelter has been run at least since November 2006 with pretty much the same field staff it has now, 2 full-time, 2 part-time, probably even longer. However, with the addition of the new director and senior field officer, they are claiming to be busier, even though they took in 355 fewer animals last year. I'm going to uncover the lies for you, since either you believe what they tell you and don't question it, or you know and allow it to go on anyway, therefore deceiving your tax-paying citizens as the shelter has done. If you look at this chart on the city website, it's made to look like there was a huge increase in field service activities. It looks like they doubled, almost even tripled. However, if you put it on a graph that starts at 0, like these 2 charts on this page, instead of the 5,800 as shown here, you see the increase doesn't look so huge after all. So the increase in calls actually averages out to less than 3 extra calls per day. But the majority of those calls weren't even calls. They were patrols. Patrolling is what the officers were told to do by their supervisor to look busy, so the shelter could justify more full-time positions. This is what a truly slow day at the shelter looks like. Patrol, 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 patrol. Now, if you take away the increase in patrol from 2011 to 2012 and the increases of other and day prep, which could also have inflated numbers, you are left with an increase of 173 calls or activities for the year, which is less than 1 call per day. Even if you just look at the increase in patrol, if it were a truly justified activity, that is an increase of less than 2 calls per day. Is this a huge increase in calls or activities to justify 2 full-time positions in place of 2 part-time positions? No, it's not, especially when the shelter had operated just fine the way it was for so many years. Maybe it's a decrease in volunteer help that is causing more work in general at the shelter. Now, even though I paid for some of these records, I'm going to give them to you for free. If you have any questions on how Field Services operates, you feel free to call me or my husband, Jesse Kreider. I would really like to know if any of you care to know more about the statistics coming out of your shelter that are affecting Rancho's tax-paying citizens. For more information on what's happening at the shelter, anyone can feel free to visit www.thatgroup.info. The shelter also tried to give me 750 page 2s that were completely blank. That's about this many to give you a visual. I would have been charged 10 cents a piece for these, but I took the records out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse Kreider. Followed by Martha Tauscher.
Hello, I am Jesse Kreider, a former employee at the Rancho Cucamonga shelter. That was my wife that just spoke, and I am aware of the seriousness of her allegations, but I am here to say to you, under penalty of perjury, is correct. And I don't stand up here really with a clear conscience myself, because I was involved in this scam to get more taxpayers' money. I willfully, following my director's directive, created as many activities as I possibly could for the sole purpose of deceiving yourselves and the public so that the animal shelter could get more money and more personnel. And I'm sorry, I should have spoke up when this was happening. And the reason I'm speaking up now is because I was waiting for the documentation so that I had proof of this. So now that you guys are aware of this, what are you going to do? Because you were intentionally deceived, and so was the public. And I was completely involved in it. And this was all under the directive of shelter management, Linda Weiserick, as well as Veronica Fincher. So I hope that you will take this and do something about it. Thank you.
Marla Tauscher.
Good evening. My name is Marla Tauscher. I'm an animal attorney. I have brought the notices of dismissal of the fired volunteers. I wanted to address some issues with you, Mr. Markman, in particular. You were emphatic. Can you turn this on, please? You were emphatic last week that you had reviewed these letters of dismissal and you were involved in the process and that you were very, very careful in drafting these letters. You also emphatically stated that you had never before heard anything about the creation of a hostile work environment. However, every one of these letters says the same thing, that part of the grounds for the dismissal was contributing to the creation of a hostile work environment in every one of these. Both of those statements cannot be true. They're mutually exclusive. So you can't say on the one hand that you never heard anything about a hostile work environment and that you carefully read and reviewed these. Also, as I brought up last week, a hostile work environment is more than simply just people not liking each other. It has to be the comments and whatever abusive language have to be addressed to a specific class of people, a protected class of people, either by gender, age, race, religion, or something else. It's not as simple as I don't like you. So, you know, the other part of this is that the other common thread through these is that the things that they were fired for were comments like this on Dana's. Staff observed criticism you posted on Facebook regarding the animal center's policies. Staff discovered additional postings you made on Facebook that are damaging to the reputations of staff. After being upset about the euthanasia of a dog, you posted on your Facebook page the following: murderers. You brought, oh, this is Vicki Royst. You brought a professional photographer into the animal center to take pictures of some of the animals. Volunteers are not permitted to bring outside persons to the animal center while volunteering. You claimed that the photographer was a former volunteer, but she is not a current volunteer and she did not meet the dress code for volunteers. If this is the kind of thing that you fire people for, this is constitutionally protected speech. This is protected by the First Amendment. It is also protected by the California Whistleblower Protection Act. As a government entity, you cannot fire people simply because you don't like what they say. It also shows that you're scared of something, that somebody's hiding something. This is a red flag. As I've said before, if you're telling the truth and if things are going the way you say they're going, you should be proud to have your volunteers and anyone else associated with your shelter talking about it, posting about it on Facebook. But you can't just get rid of them because you don't like what they're saying. It violates the law. This is protected speech. This is why we live in this country. You know, and you don't, I mean, these are ridiculous reasons. These are absolutely absurd. And I doubt if any one of you has bothered to read these. I challenge all of you to read these and read them carefully and look at these so-called violations. Wearing the wrong t-shirt? Really? That's pretty desperate. Thank you.
John Lyons. Got two more cards here. Followed by Nicole Meyerson.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is John Lyons and I reside in the Etowah area of the city of Rancho Cucamonga. First thing I'd like to remind everybody is back to school this beginning of this week. I know the parents in my neighborhood are all happy. They seem to be happier than the kids were about going back to school. Depends on where they're at. The high school students were real happy to go back. But anyway, drive safely. Remember, the kids are walking home. Most of them get rides to school, but they're all walking home. And there's just a lot of foot traffic that we didn't have before on the streets. So try to drive safely and be careful and slow down when you're in the area where you see our students. I'm going to talk about the animal shelter. I mean, these people, they come in here and they're bullying the staff. They're bullying the animal director. They're bullying the city manager. Now they're bullying the city attorney. I don't know what their problem is, but they want something that we can't give them. And last time they did the same thing before when we changed from the county to the city. And we spent like $8 million of general fund money to appease them, and I don't know what they want now. I guess they want more general fund money. But we can't do, we need to go back to a pound where we just keep these animals for a length of time and then send them to an animal rescue center. I mean, these people, if they want to go out and start a rescue center, then that's what they need to do. But that's not what the shelter is. It's a pound. Anyway, we had last night the night out from the thing. It's over at Victoria Gardens, a great event. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. It was, a first class deal, and a lot of people came out. I mean, that was probably the busiest I'd seen that mall in, a summer evening in a long time. So that was good. Good, and they were all shopping. Once they got down to the mall, they all had to buy something. So it turned out to be a really good event. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for that. Thank the Sheriff's Department and everybody else for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole Meyerson?
Council, I don't even know tonight where to begin. And I think back to the years ago and how difficult it was, and I know what it feels like to be in their shoes. I look at this council and I'm so grateful for what we were able to accomplish. It wasn't me, it wasn't Bill, it was all of us, and it was the community, and we took our shelter in a more progressive direction. We can't compare ourselves to DeVore or to the Standard of Upland, because we've gone from the age of, the dark ages into the age of enlightenment. It might seem like a lost cause. I don't believe this is a lost cause. I believe this can be completely fixed. So why don't we start with something that I believe that we can all agree on? I believe that everyone can agree that we can change our TNR policy. We can adopt a citywide CAT program. We can change this and work together collectively. We'll have support from everyone, and we will save some animals starting today. So I'm going to ask for all of your help one more time to start taking steps where we can agree on things, work in the right direction, save the animals, and start taking an approach to resolving this, because we're going to be here for another couple years. It's not going away. It's going to be resolved. They're doing records requests. This isn't being whipped out of the air. This isn't a criticism about an individual. This isn't about their personalities. Let's focus on what we can agree on momentarily. Let's adopt those changes. Let's save those animals now, because I believe if we work together as we have in the past, I love it when the opponents will show how we have changed from the county to now. It works. And even though it took us years to adopt those changes, we see that when we work together, we can accomplish great things. We can go to the next level. I fully believe that if you work with me as you have in the past and with the community and adopt these changes, this year, I believe we will be in the 90th percentile. With our current, everybody, staff, volunteers, whatever, let's work together. Let's take this first step. Let's adopt a change. Let's adopt a 100% TNR program. This is not something I'm making up. When I attended Nathan's conference, he says right here, 100% life-saving guarantee for feral cats. That's his recommendation. It's in the book. I've had Mark borrow it. I've had Bill borrow it. I'm willing to let the rest of you borrow it. You can read it from Nathan as opposed from me. Don't take my word on what the policy should be. I went to his training. I've read his books. And I'm looking at other open access municipal facilities and seeing what they do right. That's why I bring you the experts. I don't know the law. That's why I brought you Tammy Bryant. I don't know no kill. That's why I brought you Nathan. Let's do this. Let's work together and solve this.
Okay, that concludes our public communications.
Dennis?
Yes,
so,
sir.
So let me give about 30 seconds. By the way, thanks a lot, Mr. Lyons, but lawyers don't bully each other, they just lawyer. So certainly we don't try to bully each other, and I don't feel bullied. Last time I spoke, I thought I was commenting on an accusation that present volunteers or present people at the shelter would feel there would be a creation of a hostile work environment if the volunteers who were dismissed came back. I didn't take that in the context of discussing the charges that were made that were the basis for letting those volunteers go, because as I've said before, I'm not in the position to talk about those charges. Council can, people from the audience can to some extent, but we can't because we're treating the volunteers as if they were employees for privacy purposes. So I thought I made that, that was my statement in context. If it was misunderstood, then I'm sorry it was misunderstood, but I didn't think we were talking about past charges. In regard to the investigation, I'll reiterate, I understand what counsel is saying about the First Amendment, but there were interviews, there's a lot of evidence that was explained to the volunteers. There are charges that have mixed action and speech bases. There are charges that have just bases about how the public is treated, insubordination, things that have nothing to do with speech. So it's a mix of charges. I'm not going to get into it. I will say that my office was part of that investigation. We reviewed it very carefully at all levels and reached the conclusion it was a basis, if the staff wanted to dismiss those volunteers without violating First Amendment rights. You know, lawyers disagree. So if that's being disagreed with, there's a couple of things that could be done. First, all that information could be released for public review if somebody wanted, if these 4 people who were dismissed want to let that happen. And people can make their mind up what the basis was or wasn't, or whether it was fair or not. Or I suppose, and I don't want to encourage this because it costs everybody a lot of money, if there was litigation over it, then it all would become public. So I just wanted to respond, get that record straight on that. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our consent calendars.